Hello, 6th grade. This is Mrs. Froman, and we're going to be taking notes today on Chapter 2, Section 2 from the Environmental Science book. It's on the cycles of matter. So the first one I know you've learned since you were probably in like kindergarten or 1st grade. It's the water cycle. So we have the water falls as precipitation. It hits the ground, runs off into lakes and streams, or gets absorbed into the underground water. Eventually that will evaporate. As that evaporates and goes up into the air, it condenses, so it goes from a gas into a liquid form, and it makes a cloud. So clouds are actually made up of liquid water. They're just really tiny droplets, and then when those droplets kind of get together and become heavy enough, they will fall again as precipitation. So you've got your evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and back to evaporation again. So here's a picture of that. So the sun's heating the ocean. The water evaporates, it cools and becomes clouds, then it becomes heavy enough to fall again, and you've got it hitting the ground. Some of it's going underground, and some of it's running back into the oceans and the rivers and lakes. The next cycle is the carbon and oxygen cycle, and this is where the plants are producing oxygen. So the plant's producing that oxygen there. The animal breathes in that oxygen. It uses that oxygen to actually break down glucose. It says here breaks down sugar molecules. That's glucose. Those sugar molecules are coming from the animal eating the grass or eating the plants. So that the glucose gets broken down. The animal then breathes out carbon dioxide, and then that carbon dioxide is absorbed by the plant. The plant is taking that carbon dioxide and water that it gets from its roots, breaking those down, making glucose and oxygen, and the cycle starts all over again. So as you can see, plants and animals are really dependent on each other, not only for the oxygen that we breathe, but the energy that we get from the glucose and things that we eat. The last cycle is the nitrogen cycle, and this starts out with free nitrogen just floating around in the air. Like 78% of the air that we breathe is nitrogen, but we can't use it when we breathe it in. So we breathe it in and it just comes right back out because our bodies can't use it. But we need nitrogen as part of our bodies. It's a really important molecule that our body needs. So what happens is the bacteria in the root nodules fix that free nitrogen into compounds. And what that means is it's taking those nitrogen atoms and making them into different molecules. So the nitrogen will actually get into the soil, like when it rains, some of that nitrogen just gets like pounded into the soil. The bacteria take that nitrogen and make new compounds out of it. Those compounds are then taken up by plants, and the plants use them in their body structure, and then consumers, us being one of them, will eat the nitrogen that's in the plants. So that's why you need to eat your vegetables. The decomposers, once the consumers eat that nitrogen in the plants, they use that in their bodies, and then some of that does leave their bodies as waste, or it gets broken down when that animal dies. So the decomposers are a big part of this, and they break down the waste and the plant remains and return the nitrogen compounds to the soil. And then there's different bacteria in the soil that will take those nitrogen compounds and break them apart and release that nitrogen back into the air. So here's a picture that kind of shows this happening. So another way nitrogen can be produced is by lightning. So it can make that nitrogen, and that goes into the soil. It's called the nitrogen fixing bacteria. The nitrogen fixing bacteria is grabbing those nitrogen molecules and making them into something that's called nitrates and nitrites and ammonia. Then that is going to, once it's used by organisms, the plants are going to take those up, and it's eaten by the organisms. A little rabbit here eating that nitrogen. The rabbit produces waste or dies, and then that also becomes more nitrates and ammonia. Then you have your denitrifying bacteria. These are the ones that are breaking those nitrogen compounds apart and releasing that nitrogen back into the atmosphere. All right, so those are the three main cycles that you need to know for this chapter. So make sure you know the water cycle, the carbon and oxygen cycle, and the nitrogen cycle. Don't forget to do your quack. Bye.